The Beach FM Business Lunch Show, brought to you by PlaceMakers Kapiti Horowhenua. Together we're building New Zealand.
Welcome back to the Business Lunch Show on Beach FM 106.3, and we are talking employment today. And let's welcome into the show the employment lawyer from Wakefields Lawyers. It's Amy Webster. G'day, Amy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very, very well. How are you doing at this time, my friend?
Yeah, I'm good.
Excellent. Okay. Well, it is an interesting time, and we have a new show where we're focusing on business, and part of that comes employment, of course, and lawyer and all the background stuff that goes on with the good cause. But let's get to know you a little bit better. How long have you been practicing law, focusing on employment?
I've been practicing law for about 10 years, employment specifically for closer to 6, and I've been at Wakefields for just under a year.
Excellent. And in those last 6 years with employment, what kind of changes have you seen to the systems?
That's an interesting question. I suppose there's been a bit of a flip-flop as governments change, and the focus therefore changes. When I first started practicing, all the legislation was, very employee-friendly, specifies for breaks and things like that. And then, of course, National came in and that all changed a little bit, and then we've got Labor back in, and it's all kind of come back. So it's been a bit of a keeping up with where things are at. But yeah, I think now things are back to a place where we've got specified breaks, and also dealing with things like 0 hours contracts. So yeah, it's an interesting area to practice in. There's always a lot of changes to keep up with.
How's the feel with everybody, your clients out there at this time?
It's interesting, coming into level 3, I think there's a lot of sort of fear and trepidation about whether custom would have fallen off quite a lot. I've got quite a few clients who've been quite pleasantly surprised by people getting out and about, supporting their local businesses. Obviously, there's a bit of a question mark about whether that's an initial kind of surge of support and it will peter off, or whether it's there to stay, but I think only time will tell. On the other side of the coin, I've unfortunately also been having calls from employees who are in the process of being made redundant or have been made redundant. And I think there's a lot of businesses out there who possibly don't know what they don't know about making people redundant. And there's, I think a lot of, I guess not shady operations. I think these employers are trying to do the right thing. They just don't know what they should be doing. And I guess my big message there is you can't make somebody redundant without any kind of process whatsoever.
Wow. With everything going on, everything is changing all the time. We get new schemes coming in about. How have you seen the change and people receiving it?
I think one of the big things is with the wage subsidy and the fact that, businesses have signed up to a whole bunch of obligations in order to get that money, and how those obligations will kind of overlay employment law and the obligations there. So the big test with employment law is whether the employer, what they did was what a fair and reasonable employer could have done in all the circumstances. And I think the big thing there is that all of the circumstances include that wage subsidy and those obligations. And of course, there was a change on the 27th of March, but generally the obligation is that you've got to try as hard as you can, or after the 27th of March, you have to keep these people employed for the duration of the wage subsidy. And I think that making people redundant during this time, there's that risk there that that a fair and reasonable employer wouldn't have done it because they've signed up this obligation to say that they wouldn't. Right. And I think as more and more information support comes out of the government, last week they've announced this loan scheme. It's becoming more and more clear why it is they were trying to create this 12-week window where people wouldn't be made redundant so that they could get all the support out there for businesses before these kind of decisions were made. So employers who have already made those decisions where they could have been saved by this new loan, they're probably going to find themselves in an interesting situation employment law-wise. But it's very interesting times.
Yeah, indeed. I saw a story a couple of weeks ago of a man that had his payroll was fine because he had the cash flow, but he was keeping the government subsidy as a backup. Can you do that?
Yeah, well, I suppose the big question for him would be whether he'd actually suffered a 30% loss or not,
Right.
or a projected 30% loss, because if he had all that cash flow, then maybe he hadn't. But, I think sort of possibly that story got itself a little bit confused, because I think, the purpose of the wage subsidy is to subsidise. It's not
Exactly.
to cover the entire wages. So if he was using the wage subsidy and then topping that up with his own cash flow to full, that's great. And then he's probably got other cash that he was putting into, paying his rent and all his other outgoings. He probably just hasn't. He kind of had it the wrong way around, I think. But anyway. Yes.
Okay. And mate, people that have lost their jobs at this time, it has happened. What kind of questions, what kind of rights do they have in regards to keeping it, or how they can benefit from it?
Yeah, well, it depends how they've lost their job, and, it's always going to depend on the particular circumstances of the employer, I think a lot of employers are doing everything they can, and there are certainly some, small mum and dad businesses out there that are, they're throwing their own cash behind it. They are trying to negotiate as best they can with their staff to come to the table and help them. They are taking, they're pulling on the government assistance and all of that. And if, there's obviously the rule doesn't go, the obligation doesn't go as far as to put yourself out of business, So some people, they are in a position where they need to make people redundant. For employees, I think, it's a lot about the process that employers are going through. It's not, I've had a client who has sent a text message, just said, "Oh, there's no more work for you. That's it. We'll pay out the wage subsidy." That's not how you make somebody redundant.
Wow.
I've had somebody else pulled into a meeting, no idea what the meeting's about. "Oh, by the way, we're in a bad financial situation. Here's a letter. You're being made redundant." It's not how you do it. So those employees in that sort of situation have got recourse. Yeah. They've got a possible personal grievance for unjustified dismissal. And then the other thing I think that a lot of employees are looking at is what's happened to their leave over all of this. I've been hearing a lot of stories of, sick leave being deducted even though they weren't sick, or they've been forced to take annual leave without agreeing to it and without their employer having given them 14 days notice. So if they have been let go, they might still have some recourse if their leave has been, I suppose, tinkered with or dealt with incorrectly. So yeah, it's an interesting time, and it's just completely unprecedented circumstances. It's a hugely grey area of the law for us employment lawyers, because we've never been through a pandemic before, and so we're all trying as best we can to work out what's the best way to go about things and what people's rights are. But I think only time will tell, really.
Yeah, indeed. Well, mate, I thank you so much for your time today to give insight to more the legal side of employment. I'm sure this has changed everybody's, especially you. You're probably working from home, managing a family, just like a lot of us. But I think the more we know, the better we are equipped to answer these questions wherever they came arise. And like you said before, what we don't know, we don't know. So it's good that we're sharing this information.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And I think a wise person once said to me, when getting into business, one of the most important things is knowing what you don't know and getting help from an expert in those areas. And I think I can't say that enough, that, employment law is a complex area. It's not an easy area to know all the nooks and crannies of, especially when we're in unprecedented times like this. So, I just say to all the listeners, feel free to get in touch. We're offering free consultations at the moment across all of our services. So I obviously specialise in employment law, but we've also got lawyers who deal with property, family, wealth protection, wills, trusts, all the stuff you'd expect lawyers to do. And we're just trying to help the community by, helping people not get it wrong at this really, really challenging time, and particularly for small businesses. I think the last thing that anybody needs on top of all this is a personal grievance to have to deal with at the end of it. So I think getting it right now is really important.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your time today, Amy. Go well, my friend. We'll catch up soon to see more changes in the law in this ever-changing time.
All right. Thanks a lot.